Okay, so today we're doing a deep dive into a figure who is just. I mean, he's a stunning paradox, really.
He really is.
The greatest symbol of physical durability in American sports,
Mm.
and at the same time, the man whose name is now synonymous with this profound tragic frailty.
Exactly.
We are talking about Henry Louis Gehrig, the Iron Horse.
And it's such an important story to get right. I mean, the mythology around him, especially that farewell speech.
Right, the luckiest man.
It can totally overshadow the sheer grit, the statistical dominance, and the painful physical sacrifice that went into his 17 years in baseball.
So that's our mission here. We want to sift through the facts to really understand the true measure of the man, both on and off the field.
And the greatness on the field, I mean, it's just undeniable. You just look at the raw numbers.
Snapshot stats are staggering. He played his entire career, all 17 seasons, for the New York Yankees, a career batting average of .340 over 493 home runs, and get this, 1,995 RBIs.
Almost 2,000. It's a mind-boggling number. He was a 6-time World Series champion, a 2-time AL MVP.
And in 1934, he won the Triple Crown.
And the Triple Crown, it's worth remembering what that actually is, For you listening, it means you're leading the league in 3 huge offensive categories in a single season.
Batting average, home runs, and runs batted in.
Right. It's an incredibly rare feat. It shows this unmatched blend of consistency and just raw power. He did that in 34, hitting .363 with 49 homers and 166 RBIs. Just an amazing season.
So those are the highlights. But as you mentioned, there are 2 legacies that really define his place in American culture. First, that incredible endurance record.
2,130 consecutive games played.
A record that stood for 56 years until Cal Ripken Jr. finally broke it in 1995.
And the second, of course, is the tragic medical condition that is now, just inextricably linked to his name in the U.S.
Amyotrophic lateral sclerosis.
Yes.
ALS.
Yeah. So Gehrig's story is really this masterclass in separating your personal value from your public recognition and understanding how a man who was defined by strength had to ultimately find a different kind of strength in humility.
It's essential to start at the beginning, though, because Gehrig's roots,
Yeah.
they were a long way from that clean-cut American hero narrative he later embodied.
A very long way.
He was born Heinrich Ludwig Gehrig on June 19, 1903, in East Harlem. And apparently he was huge from birth. The sources say he weighed nearly 14 pounds.
14 pounds, that's almost like a built-in sign of the power to come, isn't it? But this early strength, it existed in an environment of just tremendous fragility.
His parents were German immigrants, and life in the tenements was brutal. His father, Heinrich Wilhelm Gehrig, he struggled with alcoholism and epilepsy, which meant he was often out of work.
So that put the entire burden of survival on his mother, Anna Christina Fuchs, and by all accounts, she was a very strong, dominating figure.
The main breadwinner, the disciplinarian, she worked as a maid. And this is a really critical psychological detail, right? The man who becomes the Iron Horse, this symbol of reliability, grows up in a home with an unreliable male figure and this incredibly controlling mother.
Oh, absolutely. And the fragility wasn't just financial. This part is heartbreaking. Gehrig was the only one of their 4 children to survive past early childhood.
Wow.
His brother died in infancy, and his 2 sisters died from common illnesses back then, things like whooping cough and measles.
So when you're the only one left, there must be this unbelievable emotional premium placed on durability, on just showing up.
Exactly. You can see that compulsion to never miss a day of work showing up decades later in the streak. It wasn't just about baseball ambition. It was a psychological survival mechanism that was, baked into him from childhood.
That makes perfect sense. And we also know he grew up speaking German, which was pretty common in his neighborhood, and he didn't even start learning English until he was about 5.
Right, and the name Lou, the name we all know him by, that was really just adopted to distinguish him from his father, who went by Henry.
He was a New Yorker through and through, came up through the local leagues, went to Commerce High School, and at just 17 years old, his raw power was kind of accidentally unveiled on this huge stage.
This story is fantastic. It's one of the great what-ifs in baseball lore. In June 1920, his high school team travels to Chicago to play a local team at Cubs Park,
which we now know as Wrigley Field.
Exactly. And there are over 10,000 people there watching a high school game, which is wild. Gehrig comes up to bat in the top of the 9th inning.
And hits a grand slam so powerful it clears the right field wall and lands completely outside the major league ballpark.
It was an unheard of feat for a teenager. It was like this literal warning shot fired across the bow of professional baseball.
But at first, he wasn't chasing a baseball contract. He was chasing stability. He enrolled at Columbia University to study engineering.
On a football scholarship, no less. And the mindset of an engineer, methodical, structural, it's such a fascinating contrast to the raw, explosive power of his swing.
And he almost derailed that stability before it even started with his early attempt to make some money. This is the famous Henry Lewis mistake.
Right, exactly. So during his first summer in college, he's strapped for cash. And the manager of the New York Giants, John McGraw, who, ironically, Gehrig will later overshadow, he advises him to go play some summer pro ball under an alias.
So he does. He uses the name Henry Lewis, plays 12 games for the Hartford Senators in the Eastern League, makes a little bit of money.
But the problem wasn't the fake name, it was the money. Under the strict amateur rules of the time, if you took money for playing a sport, you were no longer eligible to play in college.
And of course, the secret gets out. He gets banned from all sports, including football, for his entire freshman year.
It was a huge lesson for him, I think, a lesson in rules and consequences. And it probably instilled this deep determination in him to never, ever jeopardize his career again.
So by 1923, he's back, playing both first base and pitching for Columbia. And that's when the Yankees scout, a man named Paul Churchill, shows up.
And Churchill is there at Columbia's South Field on April 18th, 1923, which is, funnily enough, the exact day the original Yankee Stadium opened. A great little piece of trivia.
And he was there to watch Gehrig pitch. And Gehrig delivered, right? He said a team record struck out 17 batters that day.
He did. But Churchill wasn't just impressed by his pitching. He was captivated by the sound of Gehrig's bat.
The sound.
Yeah. He later said he saw Gehrig just demolish a baseball, a monstrous 450-foot home run at Southfield that supposedly landed somewhere near 116th and Broadway. The power was just immediately recognizable as, generational.
So Churchill tells the Yankees he's found the next Babe Ruth. Gehrig signs for about a $1,500 bonus on April 29, 1923.
And it's a remarkable geographical note, too. Except for that brief stint in Hartford, Gehrig played his entire athletic life, from childhood to high school, college, and the majors, all for teams based right there in New York City.
A true hometown giant. The quiet, disciplined powerhouse forged by the hardship of East Harlem.
So Gehrig officially joins the Yankees midway through the 23 season, but he doesn't just walk into the lineup.
No, he was blocked by the team's established first baseman, a guy named Wally Pipp.
And Wally Pipp, for you listening, he wasn't just some random player. He was a premier power hitter for his time. He'd led the American League in home runs twice.
But that was in what they called the dead ball era, when home runs were really rare. By the time Gehrig arrived, the game had changed, the ball was livelier, and Pipp was slowing down.
So Gehrig was mostly pinch hitting, even though he batted an insane .423 in the limited time he got in 1923.
Which brings us to the legendary pivot point, the origin story of the streak.
Yeah.
June 1st, 1925.
Yes. The story goes that Pipp, who was struggling and not feeling well, took himself out of the lineup, complained of a headache. Gehrig replaced him.
Then the next day, June 2, 1925, the manager, Miller Huggins, decides to just give Gehrig the start at first base. Pipp stays on the bench.
And he never gets his job back. That one simple decision, all prompted by a headache, launched Gehrig's streak of 2,130 consecutive games.
It's incredible. So now he's a full-time starter, but his career-defining season really arrives 2 years later in 1927.
The 27 Yankees. Murderer's Row. Arguably the greatest single team in the history of baseball.
They were an absolute machine, and Gehrig was the engine. I mean, his numbers from that year, they're just staggering, and they often get overlooked.
They really do. He finished the season with a .373 batting average, 218 hits, 47 home runs, and a then-record 175 RBIs.
And that RBI mark is crucial because it actually broke Babe Ruth's previous record of 168. Gehrig's 447 total bases that year. Still ranks third all-time for a single season.
The Yankees won 110 games, they swept the World Series, and Gehrig was deservedly named the American League MVP.
And yet, and this is the theme of Gehrig's whole career, he was overshadowed. Despite winning MVP and breaking the RBI record, the only thing anyone really remembers from the 1927 season is Babe Ruth hitting an unprecedented 60 home runs.
It's true. Gehrig was a quiet craftsman. Ruth was the dazzling spectacle. It creates this fascinating psychological dynamic.
It's like his whole background, the controlling mother, the need for stability. It conditioned him for humility, for being the quiet professional.
Yeah.
He just tolerated being number two.
And that's literally cemented in their uniform numbers. When the Yankees started using numbers in 1929, Ruth wore number 3. Gehrig, who batted right behind him, was given number 4.
He was literally and figuratively the number after Ruth.
But his greatness wasn't just about consistency. He had these explosive moments, too. We have to talk about the 4-home run game.
Oh, yes. June 3, 1932.
Okay.
Against the Philadelphia Athletics, Gehrig just went on a tear, became the first player in the entire 20th century to hit 4 home runs in a single game.
I mean, before that, it had only happened twice, and that was way back in the 1890s. He was just completely locked in.
And he almost had a 5th. In his last at-bat, the center fielder, Al Simmons, made this amazing leaping catch at the wall to rob him.
Manager Joe McCarthy even told him after, "Well, Lou, nobody can take today away from you."
Which should have been true. It should have been the headline of the century, a historic individual achievement. But that curse of being overshadowed, it struck again that very same day.
It was just cruel timing. On that exact day, June 3rd, 1932, John McGraw, the legendary manager of the New York Giants, this huge baseball icon, announced his retirement.
After 30 years.
Yeah, and that story just completely saturated the New York sports stages. Gehrig's 4 home runs were pushed to a secondary story, or in some national papers, just forgotten.
It just hammers home the theme, right? Gehrig was consistently denied the spotlight, even when he did something almost no one in history had ever done. He was defined by his consistency, not by the flash.
And that consistency is perfectly embodied by the streak. The 20,130 consecutive games, that was the defining commitment of his life.
That's why they called him the Iron Horse. On August 17, 1933, he officially surpassed the old record of 3,307 games, which was held by a guy named Everett Scott.
And Scott was actually at the game as a special guest, which was a nice touch. Gehrig acknowledged him during the ceremony.
But to really get the scale of the streak, you have to understand what baseball was like back then. This was not a modern sport.
Not at all. No mandated batting helmets, no specialized physical therapy, and definitely no concept of load management.
This streak was maintained through sheer and often reckless brute force endurance.
The list of injuries he played through is just, it's incredible. We already talked about the psychological drive from his childhood. Now you have to look at the physical price he paid.
Let's start with the head injuries. Batting helmets weren't common until the 1940s. On April 23, 1933, he gets hit in the head with a pitch.
He stumbles, but he stays in the game, which today is just unthinkable.
It gets worse.
Mm-hmm.
In June of 34, during an exhibition game, he's knocked unconscious by a pitch. He's out cold for 5 minutes.
Most players today would be on the injured list for weeks, maybe months. Gehrig was back in the lineup the very next day. And this constant head trauma, combined with his football past at Columbia, is what fuels that modern medical debate we'll get to later.
And beyond the concussions, it was just the daily grind. He played through broken fingers, cracked toes, the flu. X-rays taken late in his life showed multiple old fractures that had healed improperly because he just never took any time off.
There are some legendary stories about preserving the streak. One time, he almost missed a game with a cracked toe, but he made sure his name was on the lineup card before the official deadline.
There's also that story that the Yankees GM Ed Barrow once postponed a game for rain, even though it wasn't rainy, just because he knew Gehrig had a high fever and couldn't play.
He also knew all the loopholes in the rulebook. In 1933, he and his manager got ejected from a game for arguing. But because Gehrig had already had an official at-bat before he was thrown out, the streak was preserved.
The rule just required an appearance, not that you play the whole game.
But the most dramatic, and in hindsight, maybe the most chilling example of this rule bending happened in July 1934. And some people now think this was an early sign of his illness.
He was suffering from what they called a severe lumbago attack, basically crippling back pain. He had to be helped off the field.
He knew he couldn't play the field the next day, but he refused to miss the game. So he pulled off what's now called the shortstop gambit.
He convinced his manager to write him into the lineup card, but as the shortstop, batting leadoff.
A position he had never played professionally.
Right. So he goes up for his first at-bat, gets a single, and is immediately replaced by a pinch runner. He never even has to take the field defensively.
So just to be clear for you listening, he only had to face one pitch, get on base, and his duty to the streak was fulfilled. It just shows the extreme lengths he would go to.
And while all this is happening on the field, his personal life is finally starting to stabilize. In 1933, he marries Eleanor Twitchell.
And this was a huge turning point for him. Eleanor was a modern, independent woman, and she really helped him break free from the overwhelming influence of his mother.
For the first time, he had a stable emotional life that was separate from the team or his family.
And it led to his commercial independence, too. He hired Babe Ruth's agent, Christy Walsh, and he became the first athlete ever to appear on a Wheaties box. He was finally stepping out of both his mother's shadow and Ruth's huge public persona.
Which makes the comparison with Ruth during this period so interesting. They were teammates for 10 seasons, batting back-to-back.
And if you look at their stats over those 10 years together, the idea that Gehrig was just an afterthought completely falls apart. Yes, Ruth hit more home runs, 424 to 347.
But Gehrig was the better run producer. He had more RBIs, 1,436 to Ruth's 1,316, and he had a slightly higher batting average.
He was just this relentless, unstoppable force. There's a great quote from Lefty Grove, one of the most intimidating pitchers of that era.
Right, Grove was famous for throwing at batters to intimidate them.
But he refused to do it to Gehrig. He said, "You can never tell what that big fellow will do if you get him mad at you." Gehrig commanded that kind of respect. He was quiet, but immensely powerful.
So his career and his personal life are peaking, but his body was secretly being pushed far beyond its limits.
The decline, when it started, was so subtle that most people missed it. But those who were close to him, they saw the change around the summer of 1938.
Gehrig himself was the first to notice. He told people he felt tired mid-season in 38, that he just couldn't get going again.
And his stats, while still great for a normal player, a .295 average, 29 home runs, they were a huge drop-off for him. For Gehrig, a .295 average probably felt like a total failure.
And then the physical decline just accelerated rapidly in the spring of 1939. During spring training, people noticed a devastating lack of power in his swing. He even collapsed once.
He finished the entire spring training camp without hitting a single home run.
So when the regular season started in April 39, his performance was just shocking. He was sluggish, he was dragging the bat, and his average plummeted to a career-worst .143.
There was a reporter, James Caan, who captured the heartbreaking mystery of it all perfectly. He wrote, "I have seen him time a ball perfectly, swing on it as hard as he can, meet it squarely, and drive a soft, looping fly over the infield."
So he was still making contact. He barely struck out, but the power, the launch energy was just gone. His muscles were betraying him.
And the final moment of realization for him, the tipping point, came during a game in Washington. He struggled to make a completely routine play at first base.
The pitcher, Johnny Murphy, had to wait for Gehrig to drag himself over to the bag.
And Murphy said something like, "Nice play, Lou." And Gehrig later said that's when it hit him. He told his manager, "That was the simplest play, and I knew then there was something wrong with me."
The Iron Horse finally had to admit it.
And with that selfless realization, the streak came to a voluntary end. On May 2nd, 1939, before a game in Detroit, he went to his manager, Joe McCarthy.
And his words were so simple, so typical of him. "I'm benching myself, Joe, for the good of the team."
It was this stunning act of quiet self-sacrifice. As team captain, he carried the lineup card out to the umpires himself, ending his streak at 2,130 games.
The stadium announcer told the crowd, and they were shocked. The Detroit fans gave him this huge standing ovation while he just sat on the bench with tears in his eyes.
And in this unbelievable twist of fate, the man he replaced all those years ago, Wally Pipp, just happened to be in the stands that day.
As his condition worsened, his wife Eleanor took charge. She called the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota.
Gehrig arrived there on June 13th, 1939, and after a week of tests, the diagnosis was confirmed on his 36th birthday, June 19th. Amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS.
The prognosis was devastating. Rapid paralysis, difficulty speaking, swallowing, and a life expectancy of less than 3 years.
And here's the most critical and I think most cruel detail. The doctors guaranteed him that his mind would stay completely unimpaired. He would be fully aware, cognitively sharp, as his body just completely failed him.
The psychological horror of that is, it's just unimaginable.
His immediate reaction in a letter to Eleanor was this intense fear of being a burden. He wrote, "I made him honestly assure me that it will not affect me mentally. I will not become mentally unbalanced and thereby become a burden on your hands for life."
Wow. Even then, he was thinking of her.
The full weight of it really hit home on the train ride back from the clinic. The train pulls into Washington, D.C., and there's a huge crowd of well-wishers and Boy Scouts there to cheer for him.
And he waves, and then he leans over to a reporter and says, one of the most heartbreaking things I've ever read. He said, "They're wishing me luck, and I'm dying."
Before we get to his final act, though, we do have to touch on the modern medical debate about his diagnosis, the possibility of CTE.
Chronic Traumatic Encephalopathy.
Right. And this isn't just random speculation. It's based on his documented history of head trauma. We know he played football, and we talked about all those concussions he had playing baseball without a helmet.
And the theory is that repeated trauma can sometimes mimic the symptoms of ALS, or maybe even act as a catalyst.
It's an ongoing debate. But the major counterpoint is that Gehrig never showed the behavioral symptoms we usually associate with CTE, like wild mood swings or violence. His character remained gentle and humble to the end.
And the most frustrating part is we'll never know for sure. A CTE diagnosis requires an autopsy, an examination of the brain tissue.
And because Gehrig's remains were cremated, a definitive diagnosis is impossible. We're just left with this heartbreaking uncertainty of whether his greatest strength, his durability, was the very thing that triggered his downfall.
So just 2 weeks after the diagnosis was made public, the Yankees held Lou Gehrig Appreciation Day on the 4th of July, 1939.
It was between games of a doubleheader, and it became one of the most emotional moments in all of sports history.
A sold-out crowd, over 61,000 fans at Yankee Stadium. Dignitaries, the mayor. The air was just thick with reverence and grief.
The speeches were so emotional. His manager, Joe McCarthy, the man who stood by him for so long, he stepped up to the mic and was just completely overcome. He could barely speak through his tears. He called Gehrig the finest example of a ball player, sportsman, and citizen that baseball has ever known.
And in a truly historic move, the Yankees retired his number 4 that day. He was the first Major League Baseball player ever to have his number retired.
And there was this really sad physical detail that just highlighted how fast the disease was progressing. As he was given all these gifts, like a big silver trophy, he was seen immediately putting them on the ground.
He didn't have the arm strength to hold them.
No, his paralysis was already that advanced.
But the moment that defines him, the moment that separates him from every other legend, was his farewell speech. What we now call baseball's Gettysburg Address.
He was famously shy, he hated public speaking, but the roar of the crowd chanting his name, it finally drew him to the microphone.
And the speech was completely unscripted, beyond a few lines he'd memorized. He starts by acknowledging the situation. Fans, for the past 2 weeks, you've been reading about a bad break.
And then comes that monumental line that just reframes the entire tragedy. Today, I consider myself the luckiest man on the face of the earth.
It's an act of rhetorical genius. He immediately lists his reasons, his managers, his teammates, the fans. He even makes a joke about his mother-in-law.
The whole speech was this perfect blend of gratitude and stoicism. And it ends with that powerful statement that puts character above his condition. He says, "So I close in saying that I might have been given a bad break, but I've got an awful lot to live for. Thank you."
The response was just total. 61,000 people on their feet, cheering for almost 2 minutes straight. And then Babe Ruth, the man who had overshadowed him his whole career, rushes over and just hugs him.
It was an incredible moment. The New York Times called it one of the most touching scenes ever witnessed on a ball field.
And his commitment to character didn't end there. In October 1939, he accepts an appointment from the mayor to be a New York City parole commissioner.
This was a huge choice. He turned down way more lucrative offers to do speaking tours and appearances. He chose difficult, quiet public service for about $5,700 a year.
It was his final act of humility. He took the job seriously, visiting prisons, working right up until a month before his death. As the paralysis got worse, Eleanor would have to guide his hand to sign documents.
Lou Gehrig died on June 2nd, 1941, just 17 days shy of his 38th birthday. And it was exactly 16 years to the day after his incredible streak had begun.
Flags were flown at half-staff. Babe Ruth reportedly wept at the wake and had to be led away from the casket.
He was immediately elected to the Hall of Fame. They waived the waiting period. The Yankees dedicated a monument to him. His stats are still benchmarks. He was the leading vote-getter on the MLB All-Century team in 1999.
And his wife Eleanor's dedication became part of his legacy. She never remarried. She said, "I had the best of it. I would not have traded 2 minutes of my life with that man for 40 years with another."
She spent the rest of her life supporting ALS research. And finally, in 2021, Major League Baseball made June 2nd the anniversary of the streak starting and his death Lou Gehrig Day.
So we've done the deep dive. We've seen the paradox. The man whose body was molded by hardship into this symbol of unbreakable durability, only to be betrayed by a disease that took everything physical from him.
And yet, at his lowest moment, he chose to define himself not by the records that would eventually be broken, but by a character that remains, completely unbroken.
The relevance for you listening is, it's simple, really. Gehrig's story goes so far beyond baseball because it's about separating your personal worth from your public achievements.
His real strength wasn't playing 2,130 games. It was standing up in front of 60,000 people while facing death and declaring himself lucky. He chose gratitude over bitterness, which is a lesson that applies to everything.
We've gone through his incredible stats, his honors, the creation of Lou Gehrig Day. But given that his signature baseball records have been broken or tied, let's leave you with a final provocative thought.
Does the tragic medical legacy, the fact that we call ALS Lou Gehrig's disease, does that now define his enduring presence in the American consciousness even more than his athletic achievements? And what does it say about us that we remember the strength of his character most clearly at the exact moment his physical strength finally failed him?
Something for you to mull over until our next deep dive.